Welcome to the Brain Trust Driving Change podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Bloomfield. Whether you're a leader, a coach, a salesperson, or even a parent, this podcast focuses on how to leverage the science of decision making to help you become a more impactful communicator and a driving force for change. Welcome back to the Driving Change podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Bloomfield. And as we enter into a new year, we're going to have a fun conversation today with a very interesting guest, Dr. Jean Oursler. And Dr. Jean's going to share with us a lot. I don't even want to get into the fun stuff she's going to share with us, right down my lane with the neuroscience and the psychology piece. But she's just a brilliant, brilliant lady who's otherwise known as the results queen. So if you're looking for results, then you've come to the right show today. Dr. Jean has her Ph.D. in business psychology and is considered one of the country's top business consultants, a top-rated speaker, a world-class business performance coach. She's the author of Give Up Goals and Results Are Yours. That'll be fun to dive into a little bit. Using innovative brain science, Dr. Jean is the creator of a groundbreaking business growth system called the Caveman Brain Business Growth System, powered by Caveman Brain. Welcome, Dr. Jean, to the Driving Change podcast. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate the conversation, especially with someone who is like me. So thank you for having me today.
Oh, you are quite welcome. We're honored to have you. So I warned you in the pre-show. Our audience always likes to learn a little bit more about our guests before we get into why they're brilliant. So tell us a little bit of that backstory. Give us the origin story to Dr. Jean and how you show up today, where it really started with that. Maybe that little girl, Jean, somewhere along the way that turned into who you are today.
So I'm actually going to start where I was born. And I was born in New York City, and I identify as a native New Yorker. So we all, and from psychology, we all have places that we identify, and I am definitely a New Yorker. My parents were divorced when I was 3. Just imagine being 25 years old and having a 3-year-old and having no job whatsoever. That was my mom. And we moved in with my grandparents, who are from the Midwest, from Terre Haute, Indiana. So I like to say to people that I'm a nice New Yorker because I was raised to be a Midwesterner, even though I was born in New York City proper. Fast forward, and being raised by a single mom and having a really, to me, the best childhood ever. I would never trade my childhood. My mom was terrific, but my mom was always about getting results. And she always felt that you should think about where you're going to be in a year, 5 years, and have a 10-year plan. As I'm getting older, my 10-year plan seems to be getting smaller because, however, that's how I was raised. And my mom is a Ph.D. as well. She has 5 different degrees, believe it or not. She loves going to school. So I was raised with someone who believed that education was super important, and also to know that you should go out and do your best. With that said, my mom's family came from a management side. So I was taught that I should go into corporate America, which I did. I worked at Ogilvy and Mather. I launched lots of different products, like Aleve is one of them. So I've done a lot of interesting things, operations, sales. I then decided to create my own job in human resources because we needed an opportunity to have someone who actually could do human resources. And it came to be that I moved more towards my dad's side of the family, who are all entrepreneurs. So even though I had been raised by my mom into this management side and being corporate America, I eventually created my own job, went and got a master's degree in organizational development, eventually then had children, which I always say, how did that happen? And then people, tell me, oh, this is how it works. And then I decided to create my own company. So I created my own company when my daughter was a year old. I was a mompreneur, which was not even a name there. I tend to be on the cutting edge of things. So, the reason why I started my company is that I wanted to have, and this is my mission in life, is to have a happy, healthy, well-adjusted model adult citizen who is financially independent from me. That was why I started my business. I started as a training and development company. I morphed it into a management consulting company. And then my daughter, who was a competitive equestrian, suffered a concussion in the first month of her freshman year in high school. So I literally shut down my business. I took a few clients home with me. I became home-based again, which was very strange for me after running a very large organization. and took everything that I learned in corporate America and decided to start an online company, which I did. And then from there, two types of clients came out, women, which I love women, and professionals, specifically accountants, lawyers, and financial advisors. And at that point, I was like, now what the heck am I going to do? I hired 4 coaches because I truly believe coaching is the way to be better in life. And I hired 4 coaches. One of them happened to be a Harvard neuroscientist. And he said to me, the reason why you're not getting any bigger in your company or better in your company is what's between your, in your forehead is your brain. And so I started to learn about neuroscience and how our brains affect ourselves. And then I thought, well, I really like this. And I started to create things that were helping me in my own company. And I was teaching it to my clients. My clients really liked it. And then I thought, well, everyone else should learn this. So I decided to go to school and get a Ph.D. in business psychology, which I did do that. And now I'm the second Ph.D. in my family. My daughter is thinking that she should become the third Ph.D. in our family. And I now have been launching the Caveman Brain Business Growth System to everyone because I really want everyone to understand what their caveman brain is, how it impacts you in business, and how you can harness it and make it a propeller in your life to have a better business, whether you're in corporate America or you're running the local store, and how to do that. And that's now I'm spreading the word, and that's why I'm here today. So that's my origin story.
Wow. Okay. What a journey from New York City to Terre Haute, Indiana, to then now back to New Jersey, where you are today. And along that journey, having some Midwestern grandparents probably instill a lot of different values into you that you might not have picked up if you would have been raised in the streets of New York City.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
And a mom who really modeled that not only is education important, it's really the key that unlocks so much in life, but education by itself is useless if it's not applied, right, to not just your own life, but to the life of making other people's lives better. And so you've kind of taken that journey and then found out the entrepreneur spirit was in there, almost out of necessity at first, and then now it's turned out to be something you're passionate about. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, I like helping people start businesses. I think they're so fun, and I love helping people grow businesses. I think it's so fun. I always say to people, I want to have fun and I want to make money. And it doesn't have to necessarily be in that order, but those 2 things have to be shown up in order for us to work with you. So
yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's what, the myth that we tell our kids all the time is, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. Like, well, I like to add one of those things to it, but if you can't monetize it, you still got to go get a job.
Yeah, exactly. And I think entrepreneurship is just a wonderful way of being. It's not for everyone to get it, but you can be an entrepreneur in your organization if you choose to. So and the pandemic, what's been really great about that is we've been living in this environment. Like we talk about this being our natural habitat for 10 years. So when the pandemic hit, we taught all our clients how to do new business development in this environment. And now we're moving into more of a hybrid method. So some people are going back to work all the time. Some people are not willing to work at all. And some people are doing a bit, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Thursday. So how do you grow your business in this new world? No one knows how to do that. We've never been here before. So it's a great opportunity to be able to seize the wheel and take it where you want to go.
So I want to get into some of the practical application in a little bit on the business growth side, particularly on your strengths and gifts in the prospecting and new business development side. But before we go there, I want to back up a step. As you've taken this journey on through your PhDs and entrepreneurism and all the stuff you've done, what is the 1 or 2 really, really instrumental things you've learned about the brain that you find that time and time again, people just don't understand? I know I'm boiling it down to 1 or 2, right? I know there's probably 50, but what is the 1 or 2 things that keep coming up, the pattern that keeps coming up over and over again when you work with new people that they just simply don't understand or were never taught?
Okay. Thank you for this question. So Caveman brain is your amygdala. It sits in the back of your head. Think fight, flight, or freeze. So it's our internal protection system. It floods our body with chemicals. I often say, like, when you almost get into a car accident and it doesn't happen, but then you feel all that shaky, that's all those chemicals that are flowing around in your brain. And what happens is our caveman brains are there just to protect us from dying. That's it. That's all it is. And it's constantly scanning the horizon looking for danger, which is great when we were cave people, because if we heard or saw the bushes rustled, we thought, oh my gosh, saber-tooth tiger, I should run, I should fight, or I should freeze. Caveman brain only knows what it sees and what it hears. So if you are feeding it negative stuff all the time, then it becomes negative. If you feed it positive stuff all the time, it can be positive. So it's all about you first, and then it's about the other person across the street. However, the challenge is that there are no saber-tooth tigers for us to be harmed by. So caveman brain makes things up. And when you start to realize that it comes from 4 places, your parents, your childhood, your culture, and your life experiences, and that's baggage that people have given you, and you can throw that off the train, then you can start to really free yourself to have more success. I'll give you an example. So many of our clients say to me, I need to be perfect. I'm like, okay, how come? Well, when I came home and brought my test home, I got a 97, and my mom or my dad or whatever parent guardian I had used to ask me where the other 3 points were. So I'm constantly working for the other 3 points. Yet as adults, no one's grading us. No one says that 97 isn't good enough. Imagine if we all worked at 97% all the time, how amazing that would be. Do we really need to work for the other 3 points? So I get a lot of people who have that challenge, and then we have to throw that baggage off the train and realize that 97% is just fine.
So let's stay there a minute. So we call what you're describing as self-preservation orientation. That as human beings, we wake up every day in a position of self-preservation orientation, and we know why. It's biology, right? Everything we do is a combination of biology, physiology, and psychology, and it all just kind of comes together. And then what I love what you're talking about is what we also call junk in the brain trunk. So we got a bunch of junk in the brain trunk, and you say it comes from 4 specific areas: our parents, our childhood, our life experiences, and what was the other one?
Our culture.
Our culture. Okay, so society, culture, life experiences, parents, and childhood.
Well, not necessarily society, because society has something, it can, but usually for the individual, it comes from, so like culture.
Yeah, I was just lumping society into culture, but
don't, because society has a whole bunch of different other things, like how women are supposed to behave and how men are supposed to behave. Society has a whole different thing than culture, because culture, like for example, I'm Protestant. There's something called the Protestant work ethic, which means that idle hands, devil's work. You should be working every single moment of the day. Otherwise, something bad is going to happen to you. That is something that was given to me by my Midwestern grandparents, who I love and adore. Well, the fact is that we can't work every moment of the day. We need some recovery time. Right. Otherwise, we get burnt out, right? That's something that was handed to me from my culture. That's not necessarily from society. Totally different.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. Well, and I think a lot of the things, I love what you said too, is that in those 4 key areas, the influencers, they're both, they can be, correct me if I'm wrong, but they can be positive, they can be negative, or they can be neutral. And our brain, in your case, you call the caveman brain, has interpreted those over the courses of our lifetime and categorized them. And now it influences how we show up today in every conversation.
Yeah. So let me give you this story. My son is little. He's 4. He's talking to my mom. He says to my mom, what does mommy do all day? And she says, without missing a beat, she goes, she talks to strangers. Now think about, as kids, we were taught, you never talk to strangers. Strangers are bad. Strangers can hurt you. And yet here's my mom telling my 4-year-old son, yeah, mom talks to strangers all day long. Right. When do we get permission not to talk to strangers? That we can talk to strangers, right? When do we get permission not to do that anymore?
Yeah, no, that's funny.
Right.
It's funny until he starts talking to strangers you don't want him to talk to you, right? It's funny then, until then. Well, this is super helpful too, because I think as people, we talk about a lot of things through the context of a business engagement, a business conversation, but everything I know we do at Brain Trust, and I know you do as well, it's just life. It just, tell me the playground you're talking about, and I'll tell you how it applies. We talk a lot about the playground of business, but the reality is everything we're talking about shows up at home. It shows up at happy hour. It shows up wherever you are, because our brains go with us. Though you would doubt sometimes some people's brains have come along, it's still the case, right?
Yeah. We say how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yeah, I love that. That's Dr. Rick Rigsby. If you've ever seen him, the Lessons of a Third Grade Dropout. We had him on on in his same exact expression, right? How you do one thing is how you do everything kind of idea, which is true. I tried to get my son to understand that as I was snow blowing our driveway yesterday, and he was helping shovel it. And I was watching him take an hour to shovel a lane. I'm like, hey, son. No, but again, this is really interesting because I want people to get this. Just like you said, the Protestant work ethic. So I was raised on a farm. I'm the oldest grandson. And so it was get up at 4:30. It was go, 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 go. Now, in our case, it was a lot out of necessity, but I have this driven work ethic that is just insane. Like it's a high motor for work ethic. And my wife and I sometimes are a little bit at odds because she sees the moments when my kids are starting to probably feel less than because their dad is over here with 110% on, shoveling the driveway. And my son just wanted to make a snowman. Right. And instead of taking the time to pause and go, oh my gosh, he just built the biggest snowball ever. I'm criticizing him because he put it in the middle of the driveway that I'm trying to snow blow. Because, on my agenda, on my work ethic, it's let's go get the driveway clear. So what you're getting, when you see people, how often are they able to identify where those four influences don't help them in a given day? And what's the process that you help coach them through to not only identify it, but to quantify it? And then like you say, throw the bag off the train. How do you do that?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I worked with Alan Weiss. He's our coach. And for a long time, Alan would be like, throw the, I had no idea what Alan would talk about when he's like, throw the baggage from the train, but I figured it out. The first step is you got to know where it comes from. So like even as a parent, think to yourself that your kid is now thinking dad never looked at my snowman. He always wanted to work through the driveway. Where's the other 3 points on your test? And as parents, look, you do your best. And it's so interesting because imagine being raised by me. My daughter during the pandemic got her first job and she was upstairs and I could hear her speaking. And I thought, oh my gosh, she sounds a lot like me, right? So what we give our children, we have to be careful because we want our children better. We have a mission. We want to leave you better than we found you. So we want to leave our children better than we found them, right? That's important. So you got to think about, first you have to recognize it. That's the first step. So we say, you got to recognize it. And then you got to correct it. So often what happens is we say, do you recognize it? Do you recognize that you're having this perfection of the 3%? And then once you do it, then you need to change it. And what happens is we'll teach you exactly how to change it, what to say. What will happen is you'll say it wrong, and then you'll realize that you're saying it wrong. And then we tell people to stop, take a breath, and say it correctly. And then eventually, as you're doing that step, you'll just start to say it correctly. And those are really the 3 steps: awareness, doing it and correcting, and then just it becomes part of your habit. It becomes a habit, and you just do it.
So when you say someone might say it wrong, what's an example of that where they just don't know how to say it? Then how do you correct it?
So, for example, a lot of people say, I'm trying this, or I'm thinking about that. Those are 2 words that we believe are caveman brain hedges, because caveman brain doesn't ever want to be definitive, because if you're definitive, you're dead. However, if you know it, you always say, I know that, as opposed to, I think I know that, or I'm trying that versus I'm working on it. So those little small changes in your language of what you're saying, because remember, caveman brain only knows what it sees and what it hears. So when you speak out loud, it's listening to you. What will happen is we're talking, and all of a sudden I'm saying, well, I know that that's correct. A lot of times people will start a sentence with a no. No, that's correct. Marshall Goldsmith says to eliminate no's, buts, and whys. Why is that? Why is that? So in new business development, when you're doing why is that? Well, when we were 5 years old, why did you do that? Why is a 4-letter word in many ways. So instead of saying, why do you do that? You say, what makes you do that? Great parenting technique. What makes you do that? Because then you have to make the kid think, or the person across the table think, or your teammate think, what made you do that? That's an open-ended question as opposed to why, which is a closed-ended question. So if I start to say like, what made you do that? That's the correction that I'm talking about.
Got it. Well, words matter, right? Words have meaning, and your brain has been conditioned to interpret those words lots of different ways, but many times we use words that have a negative connotation. We don't even realize we're doing it.
Correct.
What are your thoughts on, and I don't always do a great job of this, but I certainly believe in it, is as parents, and I keep going back to this other alternative because it's the same in the customer conversation, but the most important story that we hear on any given day is the one that we are telling ourselves. And our job as parents, sometimes I think our kids hear our story that we keep preaching to them, when most of our hearts is, I want you to create your own story. I want my voice to be something that helped spark in you something that helped change your narrative that you created. Like, how do you balance that? Because it's the same thing with customers, right? How do you help guide others to recognize that as a leader, as a coach, as a mentor, I don't want you to hear my story in your brain. I want you to hear the story I'm telling and figure out how it translates into your story in a more powerfully positive way.
So we call that stating intent. So the reality is that before you tell the story, you tell the person what you want them to do. So stating intent is something that you're telling the other person's caveman brain, because you can't only manage your own caveman brain, you have to manage your employee's caveman brain, your potential client. We call them that. We don't call them prospects or prospects, your kid, your spouse, you have to manage their caveman brain too, because they're showing up. And our brains are like file cabinets. So there are a billion file cabinets, and we have to tell you to go to this file cabinet, to this file folder, to this piece of paper so that you understand. So when you're telling a story, and actually stories are really good because we talk about witnessing so that you can use that story to help you do something, whatever that might be. So if I'm in new business development and I'm brandy new and I've never done this before, or I'm super young and I'm talking to someone who's super old, no offense to, old and young, then I'm witnessing a story. So this is a story that someone else has told me that I'm going to use for myself. So when we're giving stories to our children, there's a reason why we're telling them that. And we just don't ever tell them the reason. We just give them the story. So imagine if you stated intent and said, the reason why I'm telling you the story is blah, 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 blah. Or I don't want you to think I'm coming off as not wanting to acknowledge that you have this wonderful snow person. Or it's not that I want you to really work on the driveway and not play all the time. Or I don't want you to think that I'm coming across as pushy or salesy, as aggressive here, right? Those are all stating intent. So that I'm telling your caveman brain where I'm coming from so that you're not making it up.
Right. No, that's good. And it activates that part of the brain, right? So it reframes their interpretation of what's coming next, which is in business development, when we're trained many times to activate the analytical network in our customer or client's mind, and we just tell them everything we've learned. We always say under pressure, the human brain is designed to communicate from its highest level of training and knowledge. And in sales and business development, your highest level of training and knowledge is almost always what you know, which is about your product and or service and solution. So under pressure, guess what's coming out of your mouth? The wrong thing. And so by helping even train people to state the intent to the customer, you're going to activate the part of their emotional empathic network, which will allow them to be open to then what it is that you might be able to do to help them. I have that right?
Yeah, that's perfect. Gosh, can I hire you to come work in my company?
No, I'm just so passionate about this stuff because I think there's not enough of us out there preaching this gospel, right? Because it's once you understand it and you get it, it does change the way you communicate.
Oh, amen, brother. I can't tell you how many people who go through our program were like, oh my gosh, I've changed so much, and for the better, right? Because it works. However, the process is a bit challenging because it takes a little time. It's not something that happens overnight.
Well, and it also that dovetails into the other part. The other challenge it has is I have to, as a human, be willing to say I might be able to do something better. So I have to acknowledge that there might be something I don't know about communication, because most people think, well, I've been talking since I was 18 months old. I'm pretty good at it by now. So there's a big difference between talking and communicating with impact, right?
We call that smart person syndrome, which is something we created. Yep. And we tell this to people. We say, especially in new business development, we say that from the time you went to kindergarten or preschool to the time you graduate, whatever level that is, the person who raises their hand the fastest and answers the question correctly, quickly, the quickest, is the smartest person in the room. However, in business, and especially new business development, you do not want to be the person who does that. You want to be able to ask a lot of questions. And that's often challenging to make that change, because smart person syndrome is like, well, I want to be smart. I want to show you how smart I am. And that's true for parenting or running a company or being a leader. Like, we want to show you how smart I am so that you realize that what I'm saying is truth. When you ask great questions, that shows people how smart you are, because you're allowing them to think and allow their caveman brain to come to a place where they then buy in. And try it with your kids. Like, I used to ask questions all the time to my kids, and it says it spells to telling our children what to do, because you're really raising adults, right? We're raising two happy, healthy, well-adjusted model adult citizens who are financially independent from me, period. That's what you're raising. So ask them questions, see what they come up with. And that's the same.
Let's talk about that. I think that's a really important topic, and one that there's a lot of training out in the business world around asking questions. And when I started this company 10 plus years ago, what I noticed was there's very little training in helping people understand how to ask questions that are what we call neurocentric.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you guys train folks on how to ask great questions, do you have a process? Do you have a method? Do you have a way to get them to think about how to ask those questions?
Yes, we do, actually, because at the end of the day, I'm a process improvement person. So I love improving processes. That's how I look at it. And everything should be a process. And then it makes it easy for us to continue and be able to do the process correctly, and then to evaluate what I need to do better if I need to. Yes, well, we have something called the 6 killer questions that we teach people. And believe it or not, what's interesting is when I was doing new business development, I would come in with like so many different questions, and there's like hundreds of different questions that you can ask. And I have ADHD, so I can't remember all the questions I'm supposed to ask. So I boiled it down to 6, and then I would teach my clients these questions. I'm actually thinking about making it 7. I'll tell you why in a moment. And one of my clients was like, these are 6 killer questions. Every time I ask them, I close the business. So I call them now 6 killer questions, because that's what my clients say. And there's a formula to asking questions. And you got to be good to be able to do that. And most people are really good at telling. They're not good at asking.
Well, I mean, don't leave us hanging. Give us a good example of how to ask a great question.
Okay. So in new business development, what happens is most people come in and they want to give what we call the dog and pony show. So they want to tell everything about the product. And maybe occasionally you'll say, like, tell me, what challenges are you facing? Right? Tell me why am I here today? What makes you decide to meet with me today? Is one of the questions that we ask, because and you actually, when we had our conversation, I was like, well, why did you want me on the show? Well, because, we all have the same stuff, and there's not enough of us talking about the neuroscience and what happens here between our ears, and the importance of that in business and in business growth. So even asking for the business, I have one of the questions, when you want to get started. And when you ask that question, people are like, oh my God, that's so pushy. Why? It's just a timing question. Do you know when you'd like to get started? When would you like to get started? Right? You can make modifications of that. And we often say you can make modifications of any of these questions to make you feel comfortable, because at the end of the day, you have to feel comfortable in order to do new business development. My favorite question to ask is, how's the decision going to be made to hire us? Most people have no idea how that decision is made. And then they come back and they say, I say to them, well, how are they making the decision to hire you? I don't know. Well, if you don't know, then how can you guide them along in the process? It's something we call facilitation buying. How do you help them make a decision for you if you don't know how they're going to make a decision, and if they're going to make a decision? And the other thing I'll give you in terms of new business development, which is super important, and nobody seems to do this, our clients do all the time, is something that we call date and time, which I said to you that I might make the 7th question. Would it be okay if we put a date and time on the calendar for us to meet again? That's a question. And the person, they're going to say yes, no, or I don't know. So we have something called decision tree questioning, which we teach that as well. So we actually have a whole system. And I know I'm just giving little tidbits, but try them.
Oh, that's great.
So yes, there is a formula to asking questions.
One of my big bugaboos, pet peeves is, and we see it all the time, is whenever we have a client and they inevitably have a needs analysis, it gives me hives. Because I tell them, I said, do you recognize that your needs analysis is communicating to your client, this is what I need to know for you to answer so that I can properly tell you everything I know about my products and service.
Well, I'm right there with you, because it's sort of like, can I take your watch and then tell you what time it is? It drives me crazy when people are like, well, we need to do a needs analysis and that's $10,000 or $25,000. Well, then you're not a very good consultant.
Exactly. Right.
And no offense to those who are doing it, but call me up and tell me why. You should be able to, like a doctor, you should be able to diagnose there's my New Yorker, like a doctor. You should be able to know to diagnose the situation just by having conversations with the potential person. One of the best. Oh, sorry. One more.
Yeah, please.
One of the best things that Alan Weiss taught me was he said, every client is the same. And you have the same 10 diagnoses. And when you listen to the person across the table, it's like 137 or 259. And these are the things that I can do for you. And if you don't have that list of 10, then make that list of 10.
Yeah, and I love it. And one of the things that we're big proponents on is that how do I know that you care about what I care about? Because I will not be open to listening to what you can do to help me if I don't believe you care about what I care about. And usually when I ask a client this question, they say, well, I ask you a lot of questions so that I can understand what you care about. I said, no, wrong answer. If you've been helping people just like me solve my problems for 10 years, you shouldn't have to come in and ask me what those are. You should be able to tell me that you understand what I care about and then ask me questions about what I got right and wrong. And just that switch changes it from analytical network to caveman brain, empathic emotional network. I automatically see you as someone who cares about what I care about, right? So just reframing it a little bit sometimes makes a huge difference. So, okay, another question, since we're talking about questions.
Okay, wait, hold on. Can I just say,
please.
Reframing is the most important thing that we can do in Caveman Brain. And so many people are not very good at it. And I'm sure you see that too. Yes?
Well, give the audience your perspective on reframing.
No, I was going to ask you what because I think
I'm the host. You're the guest. You answer the question.
I know, but I'm really good at asking questions. And I think reframing is so important and people they don't do it enough. And when people like you and I come along and help them reframe it to a new way of thinking, they go, it's like this whole new land opens up for them. This big light bulb goes off. It's just a beautiful thing. And wouldn't it be great to do that all the time for people?
Part of it is slowing your own mind down enough to recognize, first of all, what we talk a lot about is, whose agenda are you really truly on? And in business development, if you show up with a sales mindset, you've already lost. You can't have a sales mindset. You have to be one that's more about serving by solving. And so your mindset has to show up that I'm there to make a positive impact in the life of another human. If your mindset is I'm there to show up to make my quota, then you're going to come across that way, right? Yep. And it's hard, but especially for new young salespeople because they're eager, they're out there, and they have this mindset that, and plus they're trained completely incorrectly, and then they got to go out and be credible, right? And I show up to be credible, and all I do is activate the wrong part of the customer's brain and all that stuff, yada yada. Okay, so here's where I want to end things because I think this is going to be important, and it'll be a good way to pivot off into where people can learn more about you. I'm really big right now coming in. I started the company with this, but now I'm really big in the new year on this.
Okay.
There's a quote out there. You might be familiar with it. Don't be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. It was by the Apostle Paul, 57 AD. Don't be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Think about that for a second. He said it in 57 AD. Now I like to apply a neuroscientific lens to that. Don't be conformed to the pattern of this world. So when it comes to business development, when it comes to what triggered me with you was you talked about how you have to get these, you have to create patterns, you have to create repetition. Well, the brain does that naturally in every single thing it does, right? Neurons fire together, wire together, create new neural pathways. What are some of those patterns that you see today that companies and individuals have completely rewired or wired incorrectly that have to be rewired? What are a few of those patterns that you say, man, this really, if they could break these patterns of behavior, it would change everything?
Yeah. Dr. Bach, the Harvard neuroscientist, would say, we have to shut down this neurological pathway to create this one. First one is that we don't call it sales. We call it new business development or business development. Just that switch alone, right? Because you don't want to be salesy or pushy or aggressive. It's a lot of times it's small changes like that. You're right. There isn't a lot of training in terms of sales, and young people have this idea of, well, how can I talk? I don't have a network. I don't know who to talk to. I don't know what to say. And I had a colleague who says, show me a young person who has a coach and I'll show you someone who's super successful. And most people don't do coaching early enough. Most people do coaching in their 40s and 50s, and they should be doing coaching in their late 20s and 30s. I'll tell you that right now. So even if you can't afford it, go hire a coach. That's like the most important thing. Coaching makes a huge difference. People go to all this kinds of training. Training doesn't work because it's something that you take away and then you apply it based through your filter. You know what I'm talking about. I see you shaking your head. It's truth, right? And the idea is that we're helping. I always say to make friends, solve problems, right? That's all it is.
I love what you just said about young people, especially in having a coach early on. My papa, growing up on the farm, my grandfather, he had all these papaisms, but one of them was, you cannot give something to someone that you yourself do not possess. And so how do I learn how to be a great communicator when I'm 24 years old out of college? I don't, unless I have somebody walking alongside of me who's walked that path and who can give me that wisdom and coach me through that. Well, why do young people not do it? They either think, A, I can't afford it, or B, more importantly, what I see is it's hubris. I don't need it.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And some of that you really, again, you got to be willing to be willing to change, right? Be willing to admit you don't know all the answers. Some of that's just maturity. But for the audience members who are listening out there, maybe you're between the age of 20 and 35. If you don't have a coach, by the way, I recommend a coach in both personally and professionally.
Yes. Yeah.
Somebody who's walked the path that you're walking, who can help you, whether it's in a new marriage, whether it's in new business relationships, like someone who you look up to, who can come and speak truth into your life and help you. Yeah. Make sure they're qualified. When somebody else is going to add more bags to your train.
Right. Exactly. Yes. Yes. That is, it's so, amen, brother. I'm right there with you. Yes, absolutely. And the thing is that the other thing that I think is wrong is that it comes from me. So my thought processes of what I'm thinking about, as opposed to making it about the person across the table. What is it that person is looking for? How can you serve that person? What is it that would make, if they were to achieve it, would make them really happy? And then how do you help them do that? As opposed to, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. It's not about I, it's about you.
Yeah. We got a pronoun problem. I say that all the time, right? Sometimes we don't have a coaching problem. We got a pronoun problem.
Yeah, truth, right? Very truth. And I think that even, and then this is the other thing. Let's go to the other side of the spectrum. I've got people who are older who are like, well, I'm set in my ways. What would I learn that's new? And in thinking about your statement, right? The quote, it's all about learning, right? That's the back half of that conversation is, how open are you to learning? How open are you to growing? If you're not, right, what would that guy say? If you're not growing, you're dying.
That's true.
Right? What's your learning budget? What do you, I mean, if you knew how much money I put aside every year in my company for learning, how much learning are you teaching your people in your organization? Even if you all did a book club and just read the same book and had conversation and built common language within your organization, how are you learning together? What's your learning plan? And most companies don't have a learning plan for people, and they should.
They have what you nailed it. They have a quote training budget, which is a waste of money. They need a learning and application budget, right?
Yes,
which is
a
totally different mindset.
Totally different mindset.
Now, okay, so let's land the plane here, because we're obviously, you and I are singing out of the same hymnal on all this stuff. But a lot of folks hearing from a voice like yours is such a helpful thing, both as a speaker. You do a lot of speaking. You've got a company built around this. Tell folks where they can go and learn more about how they can engage you and your team on how to learn even more and go deeper on some of these concepts.
Thanks. So all I need to do is go to cavemanbrain.com. So it's very simple, cavemanbrain.com. Those free resources that we teach our clients that you can download and use for yourself. We have trainings that are free, because we truly believe that we want people to, even if they never use us, mission, leave you better than we found you. If you're able to do it on your own, awesome, go do it. And then of course we have our courses, our trainings and our coaching that you can sign up for. If you want to talk to me more, you can certainly do that. Happy to have a conversation with anyone to help them be better. That's how we look at it.
So what you're saying is engaging with Dr. G and her team is so simple, even a caveman can do it.
I guess that's what I'm saying, but I get this a lot. Why can't it be a cave person?
Oh, please. Well, you just helped qualify someone out, if that's the case, right?
But it's really just cavemanbrain.com. And really again.
Hey, I got the answer for you.
Okay.
the reason is it's caveman brain instead of cave person brain, because cave woman was much more evolved. She had much, right? She had much more access to her empathic network back then. It was caveman brain that didn't know how to actually communicate and help and be useful.
There you go. Although, of course, I have to tell you, women have their own challenges, and that's something that we love helping with as well. So yes, I love that. I'm stealing that.
It's yours. It's yours. So listeners, go check out cavemanbrain.com. Link in, engage with Dr. G and her team, download their resources, let them help you. And those of you who are fans of Brain Trust and our content, you know this stuff is real. The science is real. You know this stuff is real. It's just having a willingness to learn something new and challenge yourself to grow and develop. And that's how you're going to ultimately become the best version of self as possible. So Dr. Jean, it's been an honor. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
We'd love to have you back again sometime.
Yes, thank you. All right, take care.